The slap echoed through the Brookhaven Community Center like a gunshot. My glasses flew from my face, landing with a crack on the polished wood floor. All conversation died. Over 130 residents, neighbors, former clients, the elderly couple I used to deliver flowers to every Sunday, stood frozen in horror. Tiffany Green, my next-door neighbor, and the self-proclaimed queen of our upscale condo complex had just slapped me across the face. In public. At the annual Brookhaven Founders Day celebration. "You owe me that apartment, Rachel!" she screamed, pointing a manicured finger at my face. "Everyone knows you don't deserve it. You're nothing but a pathetic little florist squatting in a unit meant for real professionals." I touched my cheek, already burning, not from the sting of her hand, but from the humiliation. I'd lived in Brookhaven for 7 quiet years, never making enemies, never causing drama. Tiffany had just made me her target, and this was her big finale. The room remained silent. Some people stared at their shoes. Others exchanged uncomfortable glances. No one stepped in. Not one soul said a word in my defense. With every fiber of my being screaming to break. Down, cry, scream. I didn't. I bent down, picked up my cracked glasses with shaking hands, and walked out without a word. But outside, beneath the soft amber streetlights, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. "Helena," I whispered, my voice trembling. "It's Rachel. I need you. Please come to the community center. Now." "Understood," came the calm, low voice on the other end. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. I hung up and whispered to myself, time for them to see who I really am. My name is Rachel Monroe, and until 6 months ago, I was known simply as the Flower Lady in Brookhaven, Oregon. I inherited Monroe's blooms 7 years ago after my parents died within months of each other. Dad from a sudden heart attack, Mom from what I can only describe as a broken heart. The shop had been our family's pride for 3 generations. The scent of fresh roses, lilies, and eucalyptus was the perfume of my childhood. When I moved into the Brookhaven luxury condos, it wasn't because I could afford it. Not really. My unit was one of 5 that remained under rent control after the building changed ownership. The previous owners had promised my mother that I would always have a place there, knowing she worried about me being alone after they were gone. My apartment wasn't large or particularly fancy. A modest 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor with a small balcony where I grew herbs and miniature roses. But it was home, my sanctuary. "You're so lucky to get that rate," people would say when they found out. I'd smile politely, never mentioning that I'd trade it all in a heartbeat to have my parents back. Brookhaven itself is one of those picture-perfect small towns that seem to exist only in movies. Tree-lined streets with historic homes, a thriving downtown area with local businesses, and a community that, at least on the surface, valued togetherness. The Founders' Day celebration had been a tradition for over a century, commemorating the day in ice. 1892 when the town was officially established. I lived quietly, made my arrangements, delivered flowers for weddings, funerals, anniversaries. I knew people's stories through the notes they asked me to attach to their bouquets. "Sorry I missed our anniversary. Congratulations on your promotion. Rest in peace, dear friend." Jasmine Lou was my closest friend. She owned Lou's Brew, the coffee shop, across from my flower store. We'd meet every morning before opening our shops, sharing a table by the window. "You're the heart of this town, Rachel," she'd tell me over steaming cups of coffee. "You touch people's most important moments." I'd laugh it off. "I'm just the girl who knows which flowers last longest in a vase." I volunteered at the community center on weekends, teaching flower arranging to seniors and children. I delivered free bouquets to the nursing home once a month. I kept my head down, paid my bills on time, and never made waves. Then Tiffany Green moved in. She bought the penthouse directly above my unit last spring. A sleek real estate agent with designer clothes and a voice that carried through walls. At first, she was simply my upstairs neighbor, someone I nodded to in the elevator or mailroom. "So you're the florist," she said the first time we properly met. Not a question, a statement, with just enough inflection to make florist sound like janitor. "Yes, I own Monroe's Blooms downtown," I replied. She looked me up and down, taking in my simple cotton dress and the dirt under my fingernails from repotting plants that morning. "And you live here, in this building?" "I do. 3rd floor." Something flashed in her eyes then. A calculation, an assessment. I didn't think much of it at the time. I should have. Within weeks, Tiffany had joined the HOA board. Within 2 months, she was the president. And suddenly, there were new concerns about my apartment. The first note appeared under my door in July. Dear resident, several neighbors have expressed concern about plant debris falling from your balcony. Please ensure your gardening activities are contained appropriately. Brookhaven, HOA. I checked my balcony carefully. Not a single leaf had fallen over the edge. I was meticulous about that. Then came the complaints about excessive water usage from my occasional flower prep at home. Then offensive cooking odors when I made my mother's spaghetti sauce recipe. Each time I responded politely, with evidence that I wasn't violating any rules. Each time the complaints escalated. By September, neighbors began looking at me differently. Whispers followed me in the mailroom. That's her, the one causing all the trouble. I didn't understand what was happening. Not until Mrs. Abernathy, my 82-year-old neighbor from across the hall, stopped by with a plate of cookies. I thought you should know, she said after I invited her in. Tiffany's been telling people that you're not really supposed to be here, that you somehow tricked your way into a rent-controlled unit. What? That's absurd. Mrs. Abernathy patted my hand. I know, dear, but she's persuasive, and she's been bringing up changes to the rent control agreement at every meeting. She can't do that. Those agreements are binding. Unless the board finds violations, Mrs. Abernathy said quietly, enough violations to justify eviction. The pieces fell into place. Every complaint, every note, every whisper, they weren't random. They were coordinated, targeted. But why? I asked, more to myself than to Mrs. Abernathy. She sighed. I heard her, talking to another real estate agent in the lobby. Apparently, having rent-controlled units brings down the property values, makes it harder for her to sell the high-end units. And yours has the corner view. I felt cold all over. This wasn't just pettiness or snobbery. This was calculated. This was business. The next day, Tiffany approached me directly for the first time, cornering me by the elevator. Rachel, she said, all bright smiles and false warmth. I've been meaning to talk to you. I have clients who would absolutely love a unit like yours. The corner exposure, the morning light, it's exactly what they're looking for. I'm not interested in moving, I said firmly. Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. I could make it worth your while. A finder's fee. Something. To help you upgrade your lifestyle a bit. No, thank you. Her expression changed then, just for a second. A flash of something ugly, something predatory. Think about it. Everyone has their price. She stepped into the elevator, adding over her shoulder, and some people don't realize when they're not welcome anymore. That night, I called Helena Carter for the first time in years. Not for help. Not yet. Just to talk. Helena and I had history. She'd been my mother's best friend since college. When she retired from the FBI and moved to Brookhaven to become our police chief 3 years ago, I'd expected us to be close. But Helena was private, guarded, professional to a fault. We drifted apart, our relationship reduced to Christmas cards, an occasional bumping into each other at the Kai grocery store. Rachel, she answered, her voice soft but alert. Everything okay? I'm not sure, I admitted and told her everything. Document everything, she advised. Every note, every interaction. Start a journal with dates and times. If this escalates, you'll need evidence. I didn't know then how right she was, or how soon I would need it. October brought a chill to Brookhaven and a new level of hostility from Tiffany Green. What had begun as passive-aggressive notes and whispered rumors evolved into something more direct, more public. The first incident happened at the monthly farmers market downtown. I was buying apples when I overheard Tiffany's distinctive voice at the next stall. It's such a shame about the Monroe girl, she was saying to Mrs. Peterson, who headed the town historical society. Living in that beautiful building when she can barely afford to keep her little flower shop open. I froze, apple in hand. Rachel's shop seems to be doing fine, Mrs. Peterson replied, sounding confused. Oh, you haven't heard. She's behind on her commercial rent. My colleague handles that property, and, well, I shouldn't say more. Poor thing. Riding on her parents' reputation. My fingers tightened around the apple. It was a lie. A complete fabrication. My business was modest but stable. I'd never missed a rent payment. Before I could decide whether to confront her, Jasmine appeared beside me, sliding her arm through mine. Let's go, she whispered. She's not worth it. That evening, I added the incident to my growing journal of Tiffany encounters, as Jasmine and I had begun calling them. She's spreading rumors about my business now, I told Jasmine over tea in my apartment, telling people I'm failing. Jasmine's normally cheerful face hardened. She came into the coffee shop yesterday, asked all kinds of questions about you, how long we'd been friends, whether I knew your parents well. What did you tell her? That you're the most honest person I know, and that she should find a hobby besides harassing hardworking business owners. Jasmine grinned. She didn't tip. I laughed, but the knot in my stomach tightened. This wasn't just about my apartment anymore. This was about my reputation, my parents' legacy. The next week, an official-looking letter arrived from the HOA, citing multiple complaints and requesting my presence at a special hearing. The charges were vague: persistent violations of community standards, and failure to maintain harmonious relations with neighbors. I called Helena again that night. "This is escalating," she said after I read her the letter. "Rachel, I think it's time you let me help officially." "What do you mean?" "This isn't just harassment anymore. It's potentially criminal. Slander, at minimum. I can open a file, make some inquiries." I hesitated. I don't want to make things worse. "Sometimes standing up for yourself is the only way to make things better," Helena said quietly. "Your mother would have fought back." The mention of my mother stung. She had been fierce in protecting what she loved: her family, her business, her principles. I had inherited her green thumb, but had I inherited her backbone? "Let me think about it," I said finally. The hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening. I spent the weekend preparing, gathering documentation, taking photos of my immaculate balcony and apartment. I even asked Jasmine and 2 other neighbors to write letters vouching for my character and compliance with building rules. What I didn't expect was for Tiffany to show up at my flower shop Monday morning. The bell above the door chimed, and I looked up from an arrangement of autumn dahlias to find her standing there, impeccable in a cream pantsuit, examining my shop with unconcealed disdain. "Can I help you?" I asked, forcing politeness into my voice. "I thought we could chat before tomorrow's unpleasantness." She strolled around, touching petals with manicured fingers. "I've been thinking about our situation." "Our situation?" "This building dispute. It's also unnecessary." She leaned against the counter, close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume. "I'm prepared to offer you $20,000 to surrender your lease rights." I nearly dropped the dahlia in my hand. "Excuse me?" $20,000. Cash. You could relocate your little shop to a cuter space, maybe even afford a down payment on a small house in the East District. She named the least desirable neighborhood in Brookhaven. Everyone wins. The audacity of it, the sheer breathtaking entitlement, left me speechless for a moment. "I'm not interested," I finally managed. 30 then, my final offer. Her smile was tight, predatory. "Think about it, Rachel. This doesn't have to get uglier than it already is." I said no. Something shifted in her expression then, a flash of genuine rage quickly masked. "You really should reconsider. People like you don't win against people like me." "People like me?" "Small people. Insignificant people who don't understand how the world really works." She straightened, adjusting her already perfect jacket. "I get what I want, Rachel. Always. One way or another." After she left, I sat down hard on my stool, hands shaking. This was no longer about rules or property values. This was personal. And for the first time, I felt genuinely afraid. That evening, as I was closing the shop, Chief Helena Carter walked in. Not in uniform, just jeans and a sweater, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in its usual neat bun. But her presence filled the small space with authority. "I heard Tiffany Green paid you a visit today," she said without preamble. "How did you—" "Jasmine called me. She was worried." Helena perched on the stool across from me. "Rachel, this has gone far enough. The woman tried to bribe you to give up your legal residence." "It's not illegal to make an offer," I pointed out. "It is, when it's coupled with intimidation and preceded by a campaign of harassment." Helena's eyes, sharp and clear as always, held mine. "I've been making some inquiries, quietly, about Ms. Green's business practices. And I think you should let me come with you tomorrow night, not as your friend, as the chief of police." The thought was tempting. Having Helena beside me at that hearing, watching Tiffany's face when she realized who my connection was, it would be satisfying. But something held me back. "I need to handle this myself, Helena. At least for now." She studied me for a long moment. "Your mother would be proud of your principles and worried about your stubbornness." She stood, placing a business card on the counter. This is my personal cell. If things get out of hand, tomorrow, or any time, you call me. Immediately. Promise me. I promise. Little did I know how soon I would need to keep that promise or how publicly the quiet war between Tiffany and me would explode. Brookhaven's annual Founders' Day celebration was, by tradition, the town's most important social event. The entire community center transformed into a nostalgic tribute to 1892, the year Elijah. Brookhaven established our town after discovering the natural spring that still feeds our central park. For weeks, I had worked alongside the decorating committee, creating period-appropriate floral displays. My centerpiece was an intricate replica of the town's original church, crafted from over 500 white roses, each placed with painstaking precision. It took me 3 full days to complete, working after hours at the shop, my fingers sore and pricked from thorns despite my careful technique. The morning of the celebration arrived with perfect autumn weather, crisp but sunny, the maple trees surrounding the community center ablaze with red and gold. I arrived early, wearing the vintage-inspired navy dress I'd splurged on months ago, my grandmother's pearl earrings catching the light. "Rachel, it's magnificent," Mrs. Peterson exclaimed when she saw the completed Rose Church. "Simply breathtaking. Your mother would be so proud." The compliment warmed me. Mom had created the same display 30 years earlier for the town's centennial. Recreating it felt like keeping her memory alive in a tangible way. By 7 o'clock that evening, the community center buzzed with activity. Nearly every resident of Brookhaven had turned out, dressed in their finest. The Historical Society members wore period costumes, serving punch and homemade cookies from antique silver trays. A string quartet played in the corner while children darted between adults, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings. I was adjusting a loose rose in my display when Jasmine found me. "Heads up," she murmured. "Hurricane Tiffany just arrived." I glanced toward the entrance. Tiffany Green stood framed in the doorway, stunning in a form-fitting crimson dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her dark hair was swept up in an elegant twist, diamond earrings flashing like warning signals as she scanned the room. Our eyes met briefly. Her smile was razor-sharp. I was hoping she'd skip it, I whispered to Jasmine. "Not a chance. Too many important people to manipulate." Jasmine squeezed my arm. "Just avoid her. This is your night, too. Your work is the centerpiece of the whole celebration." I nodded, determined not to let Tiffany ruin this evening. For 2 hours, I successfully navigated the crowded room, accepting compliments on my floral creation, chatting with regular customers, and helping the elderly residents find seats when the formal program began. Mayor Wilson gave his annual speech about community values and Brookhaven pride. The Historical Society presented their yearly Preservation Award. The high school choir performed songs from the late 1800s, slightly off-key but enthusiastic. Throughout it all, I felt Tiffany's eyes following me. Whenever I glanced in her direction, she was engaged in animated conversation with different town officials or wealthy residents, but somehow always positioned where she could monitor my movements. During the intermission before the community dance, I stepped out to the kitchen for water. When I returned, Tiffany had taken the microphone. "Before we continue with our lovely celebration," she said, her voice silky smooth, "I'd like to take a moment to address something important to our community." The room quieted. This wasn't on the program. "Brookhaven was founded on principles of excellence and integrity," she continued. "Our town has always attracted the best, the brightest professionals, the most dedicated community servants." Mayor Wilson shifted uncomfortably but didn't interrupt. "That legacy is threatened when we allow certain situations to continue unchallenged." Tiffany's gaze found me in the crowd. "When valuable resources are monopolized by those who don't truly contribute to our community's prestige." My heart began to race. She wouldn't. Not here. Not now. "Rachel Monroe," she called out, gesturing toward me. "Would you join me up here, please?" A spotlight swung in my direction. Faces turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Ms. Green, this isn't appropriate for—" Mayor Wilson began, but Tiffany cut him off with a wave of her hand. "It's entirely appropriate to discuss the future of Brookhaven at our Founders' Day celebration," she insisted, "and Ms. Monroe is central to that discussion." I stood frozen, water glass clutched in my trembling hand. Jasmine appeared at my side, her face tight with concern. "You don't have to go up there," she whispered, but I could feel the weight of curious stares. The longer I resisted, the more dramatic the moment would become. Better to face whatever this was directly. I handed Jasmine my glass and walked slowly to the front, conscious of every step, every breath. My cheeks burned, but I kept my head high, my expression neutral. "Rachel," Tiffany said when I reached her, fake warmth coating her voice like poisoned honey. "Thank you for being brave enough to address this publicly." "Address what, exactly?" I asked quietly, conscious of the microphone between us. "Your continued occupation of a premium unit at Brookhaven luxury condos under outdated rent control provisions." Her smile never wavered. "A unit that, by all rights, should be available to professionals who contribute meaningfully to our community's value." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "My residence is legal and legitimate," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "And I don't see how this concerns tonight's celebration." "It concerns everyone in this room," Tiffany countered. "When prime real estate is being essentially hoarded by someone clearly unable to afford market rates, it affects property values throughout town. It affects tax revenue. It affects all of us." "That's not true," I said firmly. "And this really isn't—" "I've been more than fair," she interrupted, turning to address the crowd directly. "I've offered compensation. I've extended professional courtesy. And I've been met with stubborn refusal." The lights felt too bright, the room too crowded. I could see confusion on many faces, but also interest. The undeniable human fascination with public confrontation. "Ms. Green," Mayor Wilson tried again, "this is hardly the venue." "I want the keys," Tiffany said abruptly, turning back to me. "Tonight, in front of everyone. Show that you're willing to do what's right for Brookhaven." "Excuse me?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Your apartment keys." Her voice hardened, the pretense of friendliness evaporating. "You're holding back progress. You're clinging to something you don't deserve. Everyone here knows it." I looked out at the sea of faces. Did they know that? Did they believe her? "I will not give you my keys," I said, my voice low but clear. "My apartment is my legal residence. I've violated no regulations, I've broken no rules." Something dangerous flashed in Tiffany's eyes. "You owe this community better," she hissed, stepping closer. "You owe me that apartment. You're nothing but a pathetic little florist squatting in a unit meant for real professionals." Before I could respond, her hand flashed out, a quick, vicious movement, and connected with my cheek. The slap echoed through the silent hall. My glasses flew off, landing with a crack on the wooden floor. The sting radiated across my face, shocking in its intensity. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped a glass. The high school choir director covered a student's eyes. For a moment, time seemed to stop. I stood there, cheek burning, vision blurred without my glasses, utterly humiliated in front of every person who mattered in my life. Tiffany looked as shocked as everyone else. Not by her action, I realized, but by the public reaction to it. She clearly hadn't expected such visible disapproval. I could have screamed. I could have slapped her back. I could have broken down in tears. Instead, I slowly bent down, found my cracked glasses, and straightened up. With deliberate calm, I placed them back on my face and looked directly at Tiffany. "Thank you for showing everyone exactly who you are," I said quietly. Then I turned and walked away, through the parting crowd, past Jasmine's outstretched hand, through the double doors, and into the cool night air. Outside, my composure cracked. My hands shook violently as I fumbled with my phone, dropping it once. Before managing to pull up my contacts, I scrolled to H and pressed the number I'd promised to call if things got out of hand. "Helena," I whispered when she answered, my voice barely audible. "It's Rachel. I need you. Please come to the community center. Now." "What happened?" Her voice was instantly alert. "She slapped me, in front of everyone." There was a brief pause, then, "I'll be there in 30 minutes. Don't leave." I ended the call and sat heavily on a bench beneath the old oak tree that had stood witness to 100 years of Brookhaven celebrations. Through the windows, I could see the chaos inside, people gathered in tight clusters, gesturing animatedly. Mayor Wilson appeared to be addressing the crowd. Tiffany stood off to one side, arms crossed defensively. No one had followed me out. Not one person had stood up for me in there. But that was about to change. Because what no one in that room knew, what even Tiffany with all her research hadn't discovered, was exactly who I really was, and what I'd been doing quietly for this town over the past 3 years. They were about to find out. 3 years earlier, I received a phone call that changed my life. "Is this Rachel Monroe?" an unfamiliar female voice asked. "Speaking. This is Chief Helena Carter with the Brookhaven Police Department. I'd like to discuss something sensitive with you." Would you be available to meet today? I knew the name, of course. Everyone in town did. Helena Carter had been a minor celebrity when she arrived in Brookhaven, the former FBI agent who'd given up a prestigious career to, become our small town's first female police chief. There had been newspaper articles, a feature in the local magazine, but I'd never met her personally. Is something wrong? I asked, immediately concerned. Nothing you've done, she assured me. But I need your help with a delicate situation. I'd rather not discuss it over the phone. That afternoon, I closed the shop early and drove to the police station. Chief Carter was nothing like I'd expected. Tall and slender with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, she had an air of quiet authority rather than intimidation. Her office was spare but not austere. A few tasteful photographs of mountain landscapes, a bookshelf filled with legal texts, a simple desk. "Thank you for coming," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. "I understand you make deliveries to Oakwood Estates?" Oakwood was Brookhaven's most exclusive retirement community, a collection of luxury apartments and assisted living units on the north side of town. "Every Tuesday and Friday," I confirmed. "Many of the residents have standing orders." Helena nodded. "And you often go into their apartments to arrange the flowers?" "Yes, especially for the older residents who can't do it themselves." "Do you know Margaret Winters in Building C?" I smiled. "Of course. White tulips every week. She likes them arranged in her grandmother's crystal vase." "And Harold Simmons? Mixed carnations on alternate Fridays. He's a bit forgetful lately, so I usually remind him who they're from. His daughter in Minneapolis." Helena leaned forward, slightly. "Rachel, we've been investigating a series of thefts at Oakwood. Small items at first. Jewelry, cash, collectibles. But recently, it's escalated to identity theft and fraudulent financial transactions." My stomach dropped. "You don't think I—" "No," she interrupted firmly. "In fact, just the opposite. Several of the victims specifically mentioned you as someone they trust implicitly. Someone who notices details." Relief washed over me. "I'm glad, but I'm not sure how I can help. We believe the thefts are being committed by someone with regular, legitimate access to the apartments. Maintenance staff, healthcare workers, or—" she hesitated. "Possibly real estate agents showing vacant units." "Real estate agents?" I repeated. "Oakwood has a high turnover rate. When residents pass away or move to higher levels of care, their units are often shown multiple times before being sold." Helena picked up a folder from her desk. "We have 3 companies that regularly list properties there." She opened the folder and spread out 3 company logos. One jumped out immediately. Sterling Properties, Tiffany Green's agency. "You recognize these?" Helena asked, watching my face. "Yes, they all have signs around town. I need someone who can be my eyes and ears at Oakwood. Someone who already has a reason to be there, who the residents trust, who notices details." She looked at me intently. "I need someone like you, Rachel." "You want me to spy for you?" I asked incredulously. "I want you to be observant. Report anything unusual. Note which agents show which properties. Whether they're ever alone in occupied units." She closed the folder. "I can't put an officer in there without tipping off the perpetrator. But you're already part of their world." "I don't know," I said hesitantly. "I'm not trained for anything like this." Elena's expression softened slightly. "Your mother was Rose Monroe, wasn't she?" The mention of my mother surprised me. "Yes. Did you know her?" "We met once, years ago, when I was still with the Bureau. She provided crucial testimony in a case involving counterfeit antiques. She noticed details no one else did. The wrong type of thread in a Victorian quilt. Slight color variations in supposedly authentic pottery." Helena smiled faintly. "She told me she developed that eye working with flowers, learning to spot the subtle differences between varieties, the almost invisible signs of disease or distress." A lump formed in my throat. Mom had never mentioned testifying for the FBI. "Your mother helped us catch someone who was stealing from vulnerable elderly collectors," Helena continued. "From what I've heard around town, you inherited not just her shop, but her character, her integrity. The memory of my mother, her fierce protection of her customers, her unfailing honesty, tipped the scales." "What exactly would I need to do?" I asked. Over the next 6 months, I became Helena's unofficial informant. I kept detailed notes of which agents showed which properties. I carefully observed when valuable items disappeared from residents' collections. I listened when elderly clients mentioned feeling confused about financial transactions they didn't remember authorizing. Gradually, a pattern emerged, one that led directly to Meredith Chambers, a junior agent at Sterling Properties who specialized in Oakwood listings. What we didn't know then was that Meredith wasn't working alone. She was feeding information to someone else, someone who used that information to target vulnerable seniors for larger financial schemes. Someone like Tiffany Green. The investigation expanded beyond Oakwood. Helena recruited other business owners who interacted regularly with elderly residents. Jasmine from the coffee shop, Mark from the pharmacy, even Dr. Reynolds from the medical center. We formed a quiet network, protecting our town's most vulnerable from predators hiding behind professional smiles. By the time the first arrests were made, Meredith Chambers and 2 accomplices, I had become Helena's most trusted civilian resource. My quiet demeanor and unmemorable presence made me perfect for gathering information unnoticed. People spoke freely around just the flower girl. They left documents in plain sight, discussed sensitive matters, made unguarded phone calls. I never actively deceived anyone. I simply observed, remembered, reported. When Helena's investigation expanded to include real estate fraud throughout the county, inflated appraisals, hidden damage, predatory lending targeting seniors, I remained involved, though more peripherally. I didn't know all the details, but I knew enough. Sterling Properties was at the center of it all, though the evidence against the company's owner, Gregory Sterling, remained circumstantial. Tiffany Green had joined the agency during this period, quickly becoming Gregory's protege and top seller. Though she wasn't directly implicated in the initial investigations, Helena had suspicions about her rapid rise and the convenient timing of her arrival in Brookhaven. "She's too careful to leave evidence," Helena told me one evening as we reviewed my latest observations. "But she's involved. I can feel it." I never expected these 2 separate parts of my life, my quiet assistance to Helena and my conflict with Tiffany over my apartment, to collide so spectacularly. But as I sat on the bench outside the community center, waiting for Helena to arrive, I realized they were about to intersect in a way that would change everything. The sound of a car pulling up broke my reverie. Helena's unmarked police vehicle stopped at the curb, and she emerged, not in uniform, but in the crisp pantsuit she favored for official business. Behind her, 2 uniformed officers and a woman in professional attire carrying a briefcase. The department's legal counsel, I realized. Helena spotted me and strode over, her expression concerned as she took in my reddened cheek and cracked glasses. "Are you all right?" she asked, sitting beside me. "I'm fine. Just humiliated." Her eyes hardened. "Tell me exactly what happened." I recounted the evening's events, keeping my voice steady despite the emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Helena listened without interrupting, her face growing increasingly grim. "That's assault," she said when I finished. "Witnessed by, over 100 people. We could arrest her right now." "Is that why you brought backup?" I gestured toward the officers waiting by the car. "Partially." Helena hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Rachel, there's something you should know. We've been building a case against Sterling Properties for months. Wire fraud, elder exploitation, falsified documents. This morning, we received the final authorization we needed from the district attorney. You're going to arrest them?" Gregory Sterling was taken into custody an hour ago at his home in Portland. Helena's voice was quiet but intense. "Tiffany Green is next on our list. As his second in command, she's implicated in at least a dozen fraudulent transactions." I stared at her, processing this information. "So when she slapped me, she gave us probable cause to detain her immediately, in public, where she can't destroy evidence." Helena placed a hand on my shoulder. "But I need to know if you're ready for this. Once we walk through those doors, everything changes. Your role in our investigations will become public knowledge." I thought about my quiet life, my careful invisibility, the safety of being underestimated, overlooked. Then I thought about my mother, about integrity, about standing up for what's right. "I'm ready," I said, rising from the bench. "Let's go." We entered the community center side by side, Helena in her authoritative stride and me with renewed purpose. The celebration had devolved into a confused gathering, with clusters of people engaged in hushed conversations. A few were leaving, likely uncomfortable with the evening's unexpected drama. The music had stopped, and the festive atmosphere had evaporated like morning mist. All eyes turned to us as the door closed with a heavy thud behind us. Then, almost in unison, gazes shifted from my face to Helena's, recognition dawning as people realized who had just entered. The 2 uniformed officers and the woman with the briefcase followed behind us, creating an unmistakable official presence. Tiffany stood near the rose display I had created, wine glass in hand, engaged in what appeared to be damage control with Mayor Wilson and 2 council members. When she spotted us, the glass paused halfway to her lips, and something flickered across her face. Surprise, then calculation, then the faintest trace of unease. "Chief Carter," Mayor Wilson called out, relief evident in his voice. "I'm afraid we've had an unfortunate incident." "I'm aware, Mayor," Helena responded evenly, her eyes never leaving Tiffany. "Ms. Monroe has briefed me." We continued forward, parting the crowd like a boat cutting through still water. The whispers intensified, but I kept my focus ahead, refusing to be distracted by the speculation, undoubtedly racing through the room. Jasmine appeared at my side, slipping her hand into mine and squeezing gently. "You okay?" she whispered. I nodded slightly, grateful for her presence. When we reached the small group where Tiffany stood, Helena stepped forward. "Ms. Green," she said, her voice carrying in the now silent room, "I'd like to speak with you." Tiffany's smile was brittle but confident. "Of course, Chief. Though I must say this seems like an overreaction to a minor personal disagreement between neighbors." "Assault is not a minor personal disagreement," Helena replied coolly. "But that's not the only reason I'm here." Something in her tone caused Tiffany's smile to falter. She set her wine glass down carefully on the edge of the display table, inadvertently brushing against one of my white roses. A single petal drifted to the floor. "I don't understand," she said, glancing from Helena to me and back again. Helena nodded to the legal counsel, who stepped forward and handed her a document from the briefcase. "Tiffany Green, I'm serving you with a warrant to search your residence and office at Sterling Properties, as well as to seize all electronic devices in your possession in connection with an ongoing investigation into wire fraud, elder exploitation, and financial crimes." The document hung between them for a long moment before Tiffany took it with visibly trembling fingers. The room had gone so quiet you could hear the paper crinkle as she unfolded it. "This is ridiculous," she said, but her voice had lost its edge. "I don't know what Rachel has told you, but Ms. Monroe's assault complaint, while serious, is separate from this warrant," Helena interrupted. "This investigation has been ongoing for nearly 2 years. Your employer, Gregory Sterling, is already in custody." The color drained from Tiffany's face. "Greg is... what?" "Perhaps you'd like to continue this conversation at the station," Helena suggested, though it wasn't really a suggestion. "I want my lawyer," Tiffany said, her voice hardening. "That's your right. Officer Reynolds will accompany you to make that call." Helena gestured to one of the uniformed officers who stepped forward. "In the meantime, I'm going to need your phone, laptop, and any other devices you have with you." Tiffany's gaze darted around the room, as if searching for an ally. A way out. Finding none. She reached reluctantly into her purse and withdrew her smartphone and a small tablet. "This is all I have with me," she said stiffly. "Thank you." Helena handed the devices to the legal counsel, who placed them carefully in evidence bags. "Now, I believe you have something to say to Ms. Monroe before we leave?" Tiffany's eyes flashed with anger. "I most certainly do not. An apology for assault witnessed by over 100 people would be appropriate," Helena said evenly. "Unless you'd prefer to add resisting arrest to the charges?" For a moment, I thought Tiffany might actually refuse. Her jaw was set, her eyes burning with a mixture of humiliation and rage. But self-preservation won out. "I apologize for my outburst," she said, the words clearly costing her. "It was unprofessional." Before I could respond, Mayor Wilson stepped forward. "Chief Carter, surely this can be handled more discreetly. Ms. Green is a prominent business leader in our community." "With all due respect, Mayor, that prominence doesn't place her above the law," Helena replied. "And given the nature of the crimes we're investigating, public transparency is essential." She turned to address the silent crowd. For those unaware, the Brookhaven Police Department, in conjunction with state authorities, has been investigating a pattern of financial crimes targeting vulnerable seniors in our community and surrounding areas. These investigations have revealed systemic fraud within certain real estate transactions, particularly those involving elderly homeowners. Murmurs rippled through the gathering. I noticed several of the older residents exchanging worried glances. "If anyone has conducted business with Sterling Properties in the past 3 years and has concerns, please contact our dedicated hotline." Helena nodded to the legal counsel, who began distributing business cards to those nearby. "All inquiries will be handled confidentially and with appropriate sensitivity." As this was happening, I became aware of a subtle shift in the room. People were looking at me differently, not with pity or awkward discomfort, but with dawning realization, and in some cases, growing respect. Mrs. Abernathy, my 82-year-old neighbor, approached slowly. "Rachel, dear," she said, her voice carrying in the quiet room. "Were you part of this investigation?" All eyes turned to me. This was the moment Helena had warned me about. The end of my comfortable anonymity, my unremarkable existence. I took a deep breath. "I helped where I could," I said simply. "She did more than help," Helena added. "Rachel Monroe has been instrumental in protecting this community's most vulnerable residents. Without her assistance, many more people would have lost their homes and savings to these schemes." The revelation sent another wave of whispers through the crowd. I caught fragments. "The quiet florist. All this time, never would have suspected." Tiffany's face had gone from pale to mottled with anger. "You," she hissed, taking a step toward me before Officer Reynolds gently but firmly restrained her arm. "You've been spying on me? On the company? This whole time?" "No, Ms. Green," I replied quietly. "I've been protecting my neighbors. There's a difference." Helena nodded to the officers who began escorting Tiffany toward the exit. "We'll continue this conversation at the station," she said. As they moved through the parting crowd, Tiffany suddenly stopped and turned back to face me. "This isn't over," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You think you've won? You have no idea what's coming." "Actually, I do," I replied, finding strength I didn't know I possessed. "Justice." After they left, the room erupted in conversation. People surged forward with questions, concerns, stories of their own encounters with Sterling properties. Helena handled most of it, directing people to the proper channels, promising follow-ups, assuring them that this was only the beginning of making things right. I stood slightly apart, still processing the public unmasking of my quiet role in the community. Jasmine remained beside me, a steady presence in the storm of attention. "You know," she said softly, "I always knew you were more than just the flower girl, but even I didn't realize how much more." Mayor Wilson approached next, his expression a complex mixture of contrition and political calculation. "Ms. Monroe," he began formally, "it appears we owe you an apology. If I had known your connection to this investigation, you would have what?" I interrupted gently. "Stepped in sooner tonight, spoken up when Tiffany was spreading rumors about me, questioned why a successful local business owner was being harassed out of her legal residence." He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "When you put it that way, it shouldn't have mattered who I was connected to," I continued. "What happened tonight was wrong regardless." The mayor nodded, properly chastened. "You're right, of course. Please know that the town council will be reviewing the HOA regulations to prevent similar situations in the future." As he walked away, Helena returned to my side. "You handled that perfectly," she said with approval. "How are you feeling?" I touched my still tender cheek. Oddly enough, relieved, like I can finally stop pretending to be less than I am. "That's the best outcome I could have hoped for," she said. Then, more quietly, "The next few weeks won't be easy. There will be depositions, possible court appearances. Sterling's attorneys will fight hard." "I know. I'm ready." She smiled, a rare, genuine expression that transformed her usually serious face. "Your mother would be so proud, Rachel, not just of what you've done, but of how you've done it, with dignity, with integrity." As the evening wound down, people approached one by one to speak with me, some to apologize for their silence earlier, others to thank me for work they hadn't known I was doing, a few to share suspicions or experiences they'd had with Sterling properties. By the time Jasmine and I left the community center, it was past midnight. The cool autumn air felt cleansing against my skin. "Want to come over for tea?" she offered. "I feel like this night requires a debrief." "Actually, I think I need some time alone," I said, "to process everything." She understood, hugging me tightly before we parted. "Call me tomorrow, hero," she said with a wink. "I'm not a hero," I protested. "Tell that to Mrs. Abernathy and all the others who might have lost everything without you." She got into her car, adding through the window, "Sometimes the quietest people make the loudest impact." As I drove home through the silent streets of Brookhaven, her words echoed in my mind. For years, I had equated being quiet with being powerless. I had accepted others' assessment of my worth based on my profession, my apartment, my unassuming presence. Tonight had changed that forever, not just for how others saw me, but for how I saw myself. In my apartment, I carefully removed my cracked glasses and examined them under the light. They were beyond repair, but somehow that seemed fitting. I would need new ones anyway, a new lens through which to view both the world and my place in it. The morning after Founders' Day dawned clear and bright, autumn sunlight streaming through my bedroom curtains with inappropriate cheerfulness. I lay still for a moment, hoping against hope that the previous night had been an elaborate dream, the public confrontation, the slap, Helena's dramatic entrance. But the tenderness in my cheek and the cracked glasses on my nightstand confirmed reality. My phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine. "News is out. Don't check social media. Come to the shop when you're ready. Coffee waiting." I groaned, burying my face in my pillow. Of course the news was out. In a town the size of Brookhaven, last night's events would have spread like wildfire. By now, everyone who hadn't been at the community center would have heard at least 3 versions of what happened. Despite Jasmine's warning, curiosity won out. I reached for my phone and opened Brookhaven's community Facebook page. The top post, from local reporter Dennis Whitmore, had over 200 comments. Breaking: Police Chief Helena Carter arrests prominent real estate agent Tiffany Green at Founders' Day celebration. Sources say arrest connected to multi-year fraud investigation. Story developing. The comments ranged from shocked, "Not Tiffany, she helped us sell our house last year," to vindicated, "Always knew something was off about her," to slick by half. My name appeared in several comments with speculation about my involvement. I closed the app, suddenly feeling exposed. For years, I had cultivated invisibility, finding safety in being overlooked. Now I was the subject of town-wide speculation, the quiet florist who helped bring down a criminal enterprise. After a quick shower and a change of clothes, I debated whether to open my shop. Normal routine seemed impossible after last night, but hiding would only fuel more gossip. Deciding to face whatever came, I drove downtown to Monroe's Blooms. I was unlocking the door when Mrs. Peterson from the Historical Society appeared at my side, startling me. "Rachel, dear," she said, patting my arm. "I just wanted to say how terrible I feel about last night. The way that woman treated you. And after all you've done for this town? Thank you, Mrs. Peterson, but... And to think you've been helping the police all this time. You're just like one of those spy novels my Harold loves, hiding in plain sight. It wasn't exactly... The Historical Society is meeting next week, and we'd love for you to speak. Share your experiences. I'm sure everyone would be fascinated to hear about your undercover work." I suppressed a sigh. "That's kind, but I wasn't undercover. I just observed and reported concerning behavior." She waved away the distinction. "Either way, you're a hero, dear. A genuine Brookhaven hero." Similar encounters followed throughout the morning. Customers who normally spent 5 minutes selecting flowers now lingered, fishing for details. People who had never set foot in my shop appeared, browsing half-heartedly while stealing glances at me. Each expressed admiration, curiosity, or a mixture of both. By noon, I was exhausted from the constant attention. When Jasmine appeared with sandwiches and coffee, I nearly wept with gratitude. "How bad is it?" she asked, locking the door behind her and flipping the sign to "closed for lunch." "Overwhelming," I admitted, sinking into the chair behind the counter. "Everyone wants details. Everyone has an opinion. I've been called hero, spy, and undercover agent more times than I can count. People love a good story," Jasmine said, unwrapping the sandwiches. "And yours is pretty compelling. Quiet florist secretly working with the police, targeted by the villain, publicly vindicated." "But it wasn't like that," I protested. "I didn't set out to take down Tiffany or Sterling Properties. I was just trying to protect people like Mrs. Abernathy." "Exactly what a hero would say," Jasmine teased, then grew serious. "How are you really doing, Rach?" I considered the question. Conflicted. Part of me is relieved that the truth is out, about Sterling, about Tiffany, about my apartment, but another part misses my anonymity, my quiet life. That life was becoming increasingly less quiet with Tiffany's campaign against you, Jasmine pointed out. "At least now you're getting recognition for the good you've done, not just harassment for where you live." My phone rang. Helena's number. "I need to take this," I said, stepping into the back room. "Helena, hi." "Rachel, how are you holding up?" "Managing. Everyone's treating me like some kind of undercover operative." She chuckled. "Small towns and their dramatic imaginations. I'm calling because there have been developments. Sterling is talking, trying to cut a deal by giving up evidence against others in the company, including Tiffany, especially Tiffany. Turns out our suspicions were correct. She was the architect of the most aggressive schemes. Sterling claims he looked the other way but didn't directly participate in the elder fraud operations. Do you believe him? Not entirely, but his cooperation is useful. We've already identified 3 more victims who were too embarrassed to come forward initially. I leaned against the work table, surrounded by half-completed arrangements. What happens next? For the case? Grand jury, indictments, probably plea negotiations. For you? You'll need to give formal statements about your observations. Possibly testify if this goes to trial. And Tiffany? Is she still in custody? There was a slight pause. That's the other reason I'm calling. She made bail this morning. Her family in Portland has money, apparently. A chill ran through me. She's out? Already? With conditions. Surrendered passport, electronic monitoring, no contact orders for witnesses, including you. Helena's voice became more serious. Rachel, she can't approach you, call you, or have others contact you on her behalf. If she violates that in any way, even seemingly minor, call me immediately. Do you think she would? I think she's facing serious charges with mounting evidence, and she clearly has a personal vendetta against you. So yes, I'm concerned. After reassurances about increased patrols near my apartment and shop, we ended the call. When I returned to the front, Jasmine took one look at my face and asked, "Bad news?" Tiffany made bail. "Shit," she said succinctly. "You're staying with me tonight. I can't hide at your place forever. Not forever. Just until the trial. Or until she flees the country. Whichever comes first." Her attempt at humor fell flat. "Seriously, Rachel? At least tonight, please?" I nodded, too emotionally drained to argue. We finished our lunch in subdued silence, the weight of uncertainty settling over us. The afternoon brought more curious visitors, including several Oakwood residents who came not to buy flowers but to thank me personally. Harold Simmons, the forgetful man who received carnations from his daughter, brought me a hand-carved wooden rose. "You saved my life savings," he said, pressing the carving into my hands. "Meredith had convinced me to sign over power of attorney. If you hadn't noticed and reported it when my prescription medications were being swapped around to make me more confused." His gratitude was overwhelming, especially when I learned the full extent of what had been happening. Meredith Chambers following Tiffany's instructions had been systematically targeting residents with mild cognitive impairments, manipulating their medications to exacerbate confusion before presenting complex financial documents for signature. By closing time, I felt both emotionally wrung out and oddly validated. The scope of what we had uncovered, what my small observations had helped bring to light, was only now becoming clear to me. As I was locking up, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. My heart raced until the window lowered to reveal Graham Delaney, Brookhaven's most prominent attorney. "Ms. Monroe," he called, "do you have a moment?" Cautiously, I approached the car. "Mr. Delaney, how can I help you?" "Actually, I'm here to help you." He handed me his business card. "I'd like to offer my services. Pro bono." I stared at the embossed card. "I'm not sure I understand." "You're a key witness in what's shaping up to be the biggest fraud case in county history. You'll need representation to protect your interests during depositions and potential trial testimony." "But why pro bono? Your rates are legendary." He smiled slightly. "Let's just say I have a personal interest in seeing Sterling Properties face justice. My mother was nearly one of their victims last year, before she moved to Arizona. I hadn't known that. I'm sorry to hear that. Don't be. Thanks to people like you and Chief Carter, she kept her home and her dignity." He handed me a folder. "Look over this retainer agreement. Call me with any questions. No pressure, but I'm the best defense attorney in 3 counties. With that confident statement, he raised his window and drove away, leaving me standing on the sidewalk with yet another reminder of how thoroughly my life had changed in 24 hours. At Jasmine's apartment that evening, we ordered pizza and opened a bottle of wine. Her place was a colorful jumble that perfectly reflected her personality: bright throw pillows, art from local creators, bookshelves, overflowing with everything from coffee roasting manuals to romance novels. "To the end of your first day as a town celebrity," she said, raising her glass. I groaned. "Please don't call me that." Too late. Marcy at the bank told me 3 people asked if she knew you personally today. You're officially famous in Brookhaven. That's actually horrifying. Embrace it, she advised. You might as well, since you can't avoid it. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The town needs to know who you really are. Then another. Frauds get exposed eventually. I showed Jasmine, my hands trembling slightly. "Call Helena," she said immediately. "Now." Within 30 minutes, an officer was at Jasmine's door, documenting the messages. Within an hour, the number had been traced to a burner phone purchased that morning at a convenience store near Tiffany's parents' home in Portland. "We can't prove it was her," the officer explained, "but it's enough to question her about a potential violation of her release conditions. Chief Carter has officers heading to the address now." That night, I slept fitfully on Jasmine's couch, dreaming of shattered glass and falling rose petals. In my dreams, Tiffany's face morphed into shadowy figures chasing me through endless hallways, always calling out the same phrase: "Frauds get exposed eventually." The irony wasn't lost on me, even in sleep. The woman who had built a career on deception was calling me a fraud, me, whose only crime was living quietly in an apartment I had every legal right to occupy. By morning, the texts had stopped. Helena called to inform me that Tiffany had been questioned but denied sending the messages. Without direct evidence linking her to the burner phone, they couldn't hold her, but the judge had been notified of the potential violation. "We're watching her closely," Helena assured me, "and I've assigned an officer to patrol your building and shop regularly." "Thank you," I said, wondering how long this heightened vigilance could last, how long before my life could return to something resembling normal. But as I would soon discover, normal was a threshold I had permanently crossed. There was no going back to being the invisible florist of Brookhaven. For better or worse, I had emerged from the shadows into a spotlight I never sought but could no longer avoid. 3 weeks passed in a strange, new reality. My life had split into before and after the Founders' Day incident, with the dividing line as sharp as the crack in my now-replaced glasses. I had returned to my apartment after 2 nights at Jasmine's, refusing to be driven from my home despite Helena's concerns. The threatening texts had stopped as abruptly as they'd started. Tiffany hadn't been seen in Brookhaven since her release on bail, reportedly staying with her parents in Portland while awaiting preliminary hearings. My flower shop had never been busier. Some of the increased traffic was genuine support, regular customers buying extra arrangements, new customers wanting to patronize a local hero's business. But many were simply curious, entering with transparent pretext to stare at the woman who had helped expose Sterling Properties. I gave my formal statement to the district attorney's office, sitting for hours in a conference room, methodically recounting every observation, every conversation, every suspicious interaction I had witnessed. Graham Delaney sat beside me throughout, occasionally placing a restraining hand on my arm when questions veered into speculation or fell outside the scope of my direct knowledge. "You're doing perfectly," he assured me during a break. "Just keep to the facts, exactly as you've been doing." The facts were damning enough. As the investigation expanded, more victims emerged, not just seniors but first-time homebuyers, immigrants with limited English proficiency, recently divorced women. The pattern was clear. Sterling Properties, under Tiffany's direction, had systematically targeted vulnerable people, manipulating them into disadvantageous contracts, hidden fees, and sometimes outright theft. On a rainy Tuesday morning in early November, I arrived at Monroe's Blooms to find Jasmine waiting at the door, practically vibrating with excitement. "Have you seen it?" she demanded, holding up her phone. "Seen what?" "The Chronicle, front page." She thrust the screen toward me. The headline jumped out immediately. "Sterling Properties, the full story, investigation reveals decade of fraud." "It's Dennis Whitmore's investigative piece," Jasmine explained as I unlocked the shop. "He's been working on it for weeks. It's comprehensive." That was an understatement. I scanned the article quickly, then more slowly as the implications sank in. Dennis had done his research, tracing Sterling Properties' history back to its founding by Gregory Sterling and his original partner, Edward Green, Tiffany's father. "I didn't know her father was one of the founders," I said, looking up from the phone. "Keep reading." The article detailed how Edward Green had left the company abruptly 8 years earlier, citing ethical disagreements with Sterling's business practices. He had moved his family to Portland and started a new, smaller agency with a spotless reputation. "So her father was the honest one?" I said, confused. "Then why would Tiffany—" "That's the bombshell," Jasmine said, scrolling down to a highlighted paragraph. "Read this." The passage quoted court documents from Edward Green's divorce 3 years ago, in which his ex-wife alleged that he had been forced out of Sterling Properties after threatening to expose fraudulent practices. The settlement had included a non-disclosure agreement and substantial payment, effectively silencing Edward about whatever he had witnessed. Tiffany sided with her mother in the divorce, Jasmine pointed out. According to Dennis's sources, she felt her father had been weak, that he should have leveraged his knowledge for a bigger payout instead of walking away on principle. So she went back to work for Sterling to, what? Get revenge? Prove she could succeed where her father failed? Looks that way. And judging by how quickly she rose to second in command, she was determined to outdo everyone, including her father's ethical standards. I sat heavily on my stool behind the counter, processing this new information. That explains her intensity, her desperation to prove herself, but not why she targeted me specifically. Maybe your apartment was just convenient? The perfect corner unit she couldn't sell because of rent control? Maybe. But something about that explanation felt incomplete. There had been a personal edge to Tiffany's vendetta against me. Something beyond professional frustration. The answer came 2 days later in the form of an unexpected visitor. I was preparing to close the shop when the bell above the door chimed. Looking up, I froze. The man in the doorway was instantly recognizable from the newspaper photographs, tall, with silver-streaked dark hair and Tiffany's distinctive green eyes. Edward Green. Ms. Monroe, he said, his voice hesitant. I hope I'm not intruding. Mr. Green, I acknowledged cautiously. What can I do for you? He closed the door behind him, glancing around the empty shop. I wanted to speak with you personally, to apologize for my daughter's behavior and to explain, if I can. I gestured to the small sitting area where customers sometimes waited while I finished arrangements. Please, sit. He settled into one of the armchairs, looking uncomfortable despite his expensive suit and confident bearing. I read about what happened, the confrontation, the arrest, all of it. It was quite public, I said neutrally. Yes, he sighed heavily. What you might not know, what wasn't in those articles, is why Tiffany targeted you specifically. My pulse quickened. I'd wondered about that. Your mother, he said. Simply. Rose Monroe. I stared at him. What about my mother? She was the one who first approached me about irregularities in our senior client transactions, about 8 years ago. He met my gaze directly. She had noticed patterns while delivering flowers to Oakwood Estates, items missing from regular customers' homes, confused statements about financial decisions. She started keeping notes. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My mother had been doing exactly what I later did for Helena, observing, documenting, protecting. She came to me rather than the police initially, Edward continued. We had done business together. Sterling Properties handled the sale of her parents' home after they passed. She thought I should know what was happening in my company before it became a legal matter. And you believed her, I said, the pieces falling into place. He nodded. I launched an internal investigation, found evidence that Gregory was running schemes I knew nothing about. When I confronted him, he offered me money to look the other way. When I refused, he threatened to frame me as the mastermind if I went to the authorities. So you walked away. With a non-disclosure agreement. The settlement bought my silence about what I knew, but it also bought my family's financial security, my reputation. His expression turned haunted. I've regretted that decision every day since. But what does this have to do with me? With my apartment? Your mother reported what she found to the police after I left the company. Nothing came of it. Insufficient evidence, they said, but Gregory never forgot. When she died and you inherited her rent-controlled apartment in a building Sterling Properties later acquired, it was like salt in his wound. He told Tiffany about my mother, I guessed. After her mother and I divorced, Tiffany gravitated toward Gregory as a mentor. He filled her head with his version of events, that your mother had made false accusations, nearly destroyed the company, cost them millions in legal fees. Edward's hands clenched in his lap. My daughter always had a streak of ruthlessness, something she got from her mother. Under Gregory's influence, it flourished. So when she moved into my building, it wasn't coincidence, he confirmed. When she learned who you were, Rose Monroe's daughter, she saw an opportunity for what she considered justice. Gregory encouraged her vendetta. It became personal for both of them. The weight of this knowledge settled over me. All this time, I had been fighting not just a greedy real estate agent, but a grudge inherited from my mother, a continuation of her battle for truth and integrity. Why are you telling me this now? I asked finally. Because I'm finally doing what I should have done 8 years ago. He reached into his jacket and removed a flash drive. This contains documents, emails, recordings, evidence I secretly preserved before leaving Sterling Properties. I've already provided copies to the district attorney. But I wanted you to have one, to understand. I stared at the small device. You're testifying against your own daughter. I'm testifying for justice. He corrected gently. Something your mother understood. Something Tiffany never learned from me. Because I chose silence and safety instead of standing up for what was right. His eyes, so like Tiffany's yet utterly different in their expression, held genuine regret. I failed as a father by modeling compromise instead of conviction. As he rose to leave, he paused. There's one more thing. The case against Sterling Properties will be strong enough without your testimony now. If you'd prefer to step back, return to your quiet life, the DA is prepared to proceed without putting you on the stand. The offer was tempting. To retreat from the spotlight, to let Edward Green's evidence do the heavy lifting, to avoid the scrutiny and stress of a public trial. I need to think about it, I said. Honestly? Of course. He moved toward the door, then turned back. Your mother was a remarkable woman, Ms. Monroe. She saw what others missed, not just in her flowers, but in people. You seem to have inherited that gift. After he left, I sat motionless among my flowers, their silent presence a comfort as I absorbed this new understanding of my mother and of myself. The flash drive felt heavy in my palm, weighted with history and truth and decisions yet to be made. That evening, I invited Helena and Jasmine to my apartment. Together, we reviewed the contents of Edward Green's flash drive, damning emails from Gregory Sterling instructing staff on how to manipulate elderly clients, spreadsheets tracking conversion rates for vulnerable targets, recordings of staff meetings where Tiffany could be heard clearly outlining strategies for identifying optimal marks. This is extraordinary, Helena said finally. With this evidence, convictions are virtually guaranteed, which means you don't need my testimony, I noted. Helena and Jasmine exchanged glances. Technically no, Helena admitted. But Rachel, your testimony would put a human face on these crimes. You could speak for people like Harold Simmons, who might not be strong enough to testify themselves. But if it's too much, Jasmine interjected, no one would blame you for stepping back. You've done more than enough. I moved to the window, looking out at the lights of Brookhaven spread below. For a moment, I could almost feel my mother standing beside me, her quiet strength and unwavering principles guiding me, as they always had. I'll testify, I said, turning back to them. Not because I have to, but because I choose to. Because silence in the face of wrongdoing is its own kind of complicity. Helena nodded, a rare smile softening her features. Your mother would be proud. She already set the example, I said. I'm just following it. Better late than never. That night, after they had gone, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea, surrounded by the miniature roses I had cultivated with such care. The night was clear, stars visible despite the town lights. For the first time since the Founders' Day disaster, I felt a sense of purpose rather than just reaction, a clarity about who I was and what mattered to me. The quiet florist of Brookhaven had found her voice, and I intended to use it. The Sterling Properties trial became known as the Brookhaven Reckoning. What prosecutors initially expected to be a straightforward fraud case expanded as more victims came forward and more evidence emerged. By the time the trial began in March, 6 months after that fateful Founders' Day celebration, 27 separate charges had been filed against Gregory Sterling and Tiffany Green. I watched the proceedings from the courtroom gallery for 3 weeks before my scheduled testimony. Edward Green had already provided devastating evidence, confirming everything on the flash drive and more. Former employees testified about the pressure to meet conversion quotas for vulnerable clients. Financial experts outlined the sophisticated schemes that had bilked millions from unsuspecting victims. Gregory Sterling maintained a mask of dignified innocence throughout, occasionally shaking his head in apparent disbelief at the accusations. Tiffany, by contrast, grew increasingly agitated as the evidence mounted. I often felt her eyes on me from the defense table, her gaze burning with a mixture of hatred and something that might have been fear. The morning of my testimony, I woke before dawn. I selected my outfit carefully. A simple navy blue dress that had been my mother's favorite, pearl earrings she had given me for my 25th birthday, a small brooch shaped like a rose that had been her signature accessory. Looking in the mirror, I saw her reflected in my eyes, my stance, my resolve. Jasmine met me outside the courthouse, a thermos of her special lavender honey tea in hand. For your nerves, she explained, linking her arm through mine as we climbed the steps. I'm not nervous, I realized, surprised by the truth of it. Just ready. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, Brookhaven residents, victims, and their families. Helena sat in the front row, her expression calm and confident. Graham Delaney waited near the prosecution table, ready to step in if needed. When I was called to the stand, the room fell silent. I felt the weight of all those eyes as I walked forward, took the oath, and settled into the witness chair. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Andrea Martinez, led me gently through my testimony. I described my initial involvement with Helena's investigation, the patterns I had observed at Oakwood Estates, the gradual realization of how widespread the fraud had become. "And did you have any personal interactions with the defendants regarding these matters?" she asked finally. "With Ms. Green? Yes. I recounted Tiffany's campaign against me, the HOA complaints, the attempts to force me from my apartment, culminating in the public confrontation and assault at Founders Day. In your opinion, Ms. Monroe, why did the defendant target you so specifically?" Before I could answer, Tiffany's attorney objected. "Calls for speculation, Your Honor." "I'll rephrase," Martinez said smoothly. "Ms. Monroe, did you later learn of any connection between yourself and Ms. Green that might explain her actions toward you?" "Yes." I looked directly at Tiffany for the first time since entering the courtroom. "I learned that my mother, Rose Monroe, had reported suspicious activities at Sterling Properties 8 years earlier. Her reports led to Edward Green leaving the company and eventually to the current investigation." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Tiffany's face had gone pale. "So, in your understanding," Martinez continued, "Ms. Green's actions against you were, at least in part, retribution for your mother's whistleblowing?" "That's my understanding, yes." Tiffany's attorney's cross-examination was aggressive, but ultimately ineffective. He tried to portray my observations as biased, my involvement with Helena as improper, my testimony as tainted by personal animosity. "Isn't it true," he demanded, "that you had a financial motive to discredit my client? That you feared losing your rent-controlled apartment if she succeeded in changing the HOA regulations?" I met his gaze steadily. "I had a legal right to that apartment. Ms. Green's attempts to force me out were what was improper, not my desire to remain in my legal residence." "But you benefited from reporting these alleged improprieties, did you not? You kept your apartment. You became something of a local celebrity. Your flower shop business increased substantially." "I didn't report what I saw for any personal benefit," I replied. "I reported it because elderly people were being defrauded of their life savings, because vulnerable people were being targeted by those they should have been able to trust. I reported it because it was wrong, and staying silent would have made me complicit." When I was finally excused from the stand, my legs felt wooden, but my mind was clear. I had spoken the truth, not just about what I had witnessed, but about why it mattered. As I passed the defense table, Tiffany suddenly reached out, grabbing my wrist. "You're just like her," she hissed, her voice low enough that only I could hear. "Self-righteous, destructive. You have no idea what you've done." The bailiff moved quickly to separate us, but I didn't pull away. Instead, I leaned slightly closer. "I know exactly what I've done," I said quietly. "I finished what my mother started, and I'd do it again." The jury deliberated for just 2 days before returning guilty verdicts on all counts for both defendants. Gregory Sterling was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Tiffany received 12 years, with the judge specifically citing her calculated targeting of vulnerable individuals and apparent lack of remorse as factors in the sentence. As spring bloomed in Brookhaven, the town gradually recovered from the scandal that had shaken its foundations. Sterling Properties was dissolved, its assets used to create a restitution fund for victims. The building where my apartment was located was sold to a nonprofit housing organization that committed to maintaining all existing rent control agreements in perpetuity. My life settled into a new normal, busier than before, but with purpose rather than chaos. I expanded Monroe's Blooms, hiring 2 part-time employees to help manage the increased business. I continued teaching flower arranging at the community center, but added a monthly workshop, specifically for seniors on recognizing and avoiding financial scams. Helena and I became regular collaborators, developing a community awareness program about elder fraud that was eventually adopted by counties throughout the state. My quiet observations had proven valuable enough that she occasionally asked for my perspective on other cases where subtle patterns might reveal hidden truths. 1 year to the day after Founders Day, the town held a special ceremony in the community center, the same room where Tiffany had publicly humiliated me, where my quiet life had been irrevocably altered. Mayor Wilson presented me with the Brookhaven Citizen of the Year Award, citing my courage, integrity, and unwavering commitment to protecting our most vulnerable residents. As I accepted the plaque, looking out at the gathered faces. Jasmine beaming proudly, Helena standing tall at the back of the room, Harold Simmons and other Oakwood residents applauding enthusiastically. I felt a strange sense of completion. "This honor really belongs to my mother," I said into the microphone. Rose Monroe taught me that noticing details matters, that small things can reveal big truths, that silence, in the face of wrongdoing, is never the right choice, even when speaking up is frightening. I paused, gathering my thoughts. I was known for years as just the quiet florist. Some people mistook that quietness for weakness, but there's strength in observation, in patience, in careful attention. My flowers taught me that the most beautiful blooms often grow from the most unassuming buds. After the ceremony, as people mingled over punch and cookies, a tall man with familiar features approached me. "Ms. Monroe," Edward Green said, extending his hand. "Congratulations on your well-deserved recognition." "Thank you." I shook his hand. "How are you?" "Finding my way." He smiled faintly. "I've started a small foundation to educate seniors about financial predators, using what I know to try to prevent what happened here." "That's admirable. It's necessary." He glanced around the decorated hall. "I visited Tiffany last week. It was difficult. She still blames everyone but herself. She mentioned you." I tensed slightly. "Oh?" "Nothing threatening," he assured me. "Just that she underestimated you. That you weren't what you seemed." His smile became more genuine. "I took it as a compliment on your behalf. I'll choose to see it that way too," I said. As Edward moved away, Helena joined me, glass of sparkling cider in hand. "Quite a journey from last year's celebration," she observed. "Quite," I agreed, looking around the room that had once witnessed my greatest humiliation and now celebrated my contributions. "I never would have chosen this path, being visible, being known. Some people are meant for more than they initially choose for themselves," Helena said. "Your mother understood that. So do you now." Later that evening, I stood on my balcony, watching the sunset paint Brookhaven in hues of gold and pink. My miniature roses had just begun their spring bloom, their delicate fragrance filling the air. In a pot near the railing, a special white rosebush, grown from a cutting I had preserved from my Founder's Day church sculpture, had produced its first perfect blossom. I touched its petals gently, thinking of all that had changed in a year. The quiet florist was quiet no longer. Or rather, I had learned that quietness and strength were not mutually exclusive. That observation could be a form of action. That integrity, like a well-tended garden, required both patience and vigilance. Inside, on my mantle, the Citizen of the Year plaque stood beside a framed photograph of my mother in her flower shop, surrounded by the roses she had loved so well. I liked to think she was watching, approving of how I had finally found my voice, not in shouting, but in speaking truth when it mattered most. Brookhaven had always been my home, but now, it was more than that. It was a place where I belonged, not despite my quietness, but because of the strength that had grown from it, like a rose from unlikely soil, blooming defiantly in its own perfect time.